Moseley. I'm an editor here. And it was a high energy, high octane start. I hope I'm going to be able to live up to the lovely Rihanna. We are here to do the first in a new type of thinking, which is called Making Sense of ... And I got to do the first one because James was looking at me when he had the idea. So that's why it's me. And he said, what is the topic that you would pick? And for those of you who've been members of Tortoise for quite a long time, you might remember we talked about dating apps quite a lot in our old newsroom around the corner on East Castle Street. When sometimes, every so often, it doesn't happen a lot, a story walks into the newsroom, and with a dating app, it was a series called Modern Love, hosted by Mary Pym Mills, who's an editor here. And one of the people who turned up to that thinking happened to be, we hadn't invited him, he'd come along as a friend of somebody else, the chief technology officer at one of the big dating apps. And he said, oh, of course, we don't write the algorithm to match you with people you like. Obviously, we write it to keep you single because that's our business model. And it's a brilliant germ of an insight that then Zav, who is here somewhere, I think, wrote a piece on called The Loneliness of the Infinite Swipers. And it sort of set off the beginnings of an inkling of something that I've never stopped thinking about. Now, I am old, and I was into internet dating when it was still for freaks and weirdos only, and I've never used a dating app. So I'm coming at this as an outsider, but I have had my experiences in the world of online dating, and that is a very different kind of thinking, me telling my stories of the people, who I have met. But I'm interested in this because I think it's a bucket full of stories, and even though we've had big energy Rihanna and I'm having a glass of wine, which I don't normally do when I'm editing a thinking, it's a serious conversation. And the reason it's a serious conversation is because really what I'm interested in is safety. So I'm going to ask a few questions. We've done a bit of a survey before tonight, so I've got a bit of a sense of where Tortoise members are at with this. So if it's okay with you to demonstrate it's a thinking where you all get to join in, and I'm here to try and understand what goes on in the world. Show of hands, and if you're watching at home, type away in the chat. Who is currently a user of a dating app? Raise your hands all the way. Half is, yeah, I can see it, maybe dip in and out. Okay, so maybe just less than half the people in the room. Okay. Raise your hand if you ever have been a user of a dating app. Okay, almost everybody. Okay. If you never have, is there anyone that never has apart from me? Okay, James, why not?
I think I'm just too old, so I met my wife before dating apps were a thing.
Okay, all right. Oh, yes, sorry, a mic.
Should I say it again?
Yes. James is too old.
Too old. Met wife before dating apps.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks, James. Alice, why have you never been one?
Not going to make a comparison to James's age, but I've been in a very long-term relationship, so I think I missed the boat.
So it's not a sort of moral, ethical, there's no resistance to it, it's just you never had the need of it.
Would be all over them if I needed to. Yeah.
Okay. In the survey, this is just as a bit of context that we did for Tortoise members, we asked them stuff like, do you use them? Have you had good experiences, bad experiences, just general stuff. I was quite taken by the fact that of the people who filled in the survey, and it's not like it's representative, there was about 80 people or something like that, who thinks, in the question, do you think dating apps take user safety seriously? Let's have a guess at the percentage of people who said yes.
10.
5, 10. Did you say 5, Lois?
No.
Katie?
I said 20.
Okay, so 5, 10, 20, so low. The answer we were looking for was 10% of people. And this was of the people who you run a dating app, so you don't count. So 10% of the people who currently use dating apps think that they take their own personal safety seriously. And to me, that is the most extraordinary thing to discover, because it's not as though personal safety is not a really important thing to everyone, especially in a world when you're, dating people you don't know and going and meeting them or whatever else. So that's really what I'm interested to make sense of tonight. In general, the accepted social discourse, I think, about dating is that they're a bit of fun, everybody does it, lots of people have met their life partner through Tinder now, like it's not weird or embarrassing to say that that was how you met, like it maybe was at one stage. And if you keep your wits about you and do some general stuff, it's certainly no more dangerous than meeting somebody in a bar, as if anybody ever does that now. But I'm not convinced.
Not true.
I'm going to put, until you're in thing. But I'm not convinced. I'm going to lay this out there because I want to be sure that we're talking about the right things in this thinking. I'm not convinced that dating apps have not created the perfect crucible for a deepening monetization of misogyny. I am not convinced that if we added up all of the interactions on all of the dating apps, all of the swipes and direct messages or whatever, I'm not convinced if we added up all of those interactions that the majority of them would be positive. I'm not convinced. And I'm not convinced that the data security and the personal safety, so there's two aspects of that the app providers advertise, some of them, and kind of trade on, both in terms of prevention, sanctions for perpetrators of, let's say, abuse, and aftercare for victims. I'm not convinced that those things work or that they would even be sufficient relative to the commercial and social power of the platforms that offer them, would be sufficient even if they did work. I'm not convinced about any of those things. So I've put myself out there to say, this is where I'm starting from. And this is why I've kept on thinking about this story since 2019 when we first did it. So what I really want to make sense of tonight, with your help, is, are dating apps responsible companies? That's really what this comes down to. And I'd love to hear your experiences of them, particularly of the not so nice, not the I met my husband and he's amazing and we love each other and we love Twitter. I'm really pleased for you, but that's not so much what we're here for today. Matt is here. Hello.
Hello, this is going to be a tough
Matt
tough evening, isn't it?
McNeil. Matt McNeil Love. I love a bit of nominative determinism, and your surname is literally Love,
It is.
not hookup, which it also could be. And online, I hope, if we can see her, is Catherine. Is that? Oh, hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for being there. And Catherine, is it Cosmides, something like that? Oh, I'd love to know. I don't want to make it wrong.
It's Cosmides.
Cosmides, there we go. I was close.
Thank you.
Catherine Cosmides is founder and CEO of Garbo. Well, Catherine will tell us in a second what that is and how you may have encountered Garbo in your travels around Tinder. I'm going to start with Matt. Matt is co-founder and COO of Thursday. Has anybody ever used Thursday? It's a dating service. Is that what we call it?
Yeah,
Type thing?
A dating app that's not quite a dating app.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us about Thursday, briefly.
A dating app that works one day of the week, I'll let you guess which, with a North Star of getting people to meet face-to-face as quickly as possible.
So, if I were to join Thursday, do I pay you money?
No, free.
So I download an app on my phone.
Yep.
As a bit of swiping?
So you will see, if you download the app, if you went on the app physically today, it will literally tell you to go away, quite physically say, go away. There's more to life than dating apps. If you go on it tomorrow and you switch a toggle that says, I'm free and want to go on a date today, it will open up a map for you that will show you people who match your criteria and you match their criteria that also want to go on a date that day and have opted in saying, I want to go on a date today. With a view to get people to interact more quickly than this whole, hey, how are you? 3 days later, I'm all right, how are you? 3 days later, yeah, I'm good, how's things? 3 days later.
Is that what it's like? Yeah, everyone's following it.
But at midnight, all messages, matches, delete for the consumer.
Oh.
Because I know this is about to be about safety, not for us.
Okay, so the messages that have been sent in on the Thursday,
delete at midnight,
they disappear.
And everyone's made well aware of that. The idea being that you need to act instead of just sitting there dormant like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, all these other main dating apps where you can sit there and there'll be people in this audience who will have got a match or a like or something right now but they're sat here listening to me drone on, and they're not actually an active user. And they'll be like, oh, cool, I've got a match, that's cool, or I've got a like. I might look at that when I'm hungover in bed on a Sunday, but it won't actually result in anything.
So is the existence of Thursday, bearing in mind, like you said, if I were to go on it now, it would say, go away, there's more to life than dating app. There's some copy on the website, which is spend 6 days working on thinking about yourself and looking after yourself.
Yeah.
Don't be, is the existence of Thursday a tacit acknowledgement, in your opinion, that other dating apps are addictive?
Absolutely. And bad for you.
Say more.
I think social media, in line with social media, if you're judging somebody on 4 photos and a couple of prompts, it's not a very nice society to live in my opinion, and my co-founder's opinion, and our company. I think often when you hear about people who are in happy relationships, it's come from situations where they shouldn't have ever met or shouldn't have ever happened, yet some spark has kicked off because you cannot recreate human interaction online in our sort of thesis and opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy when you match with someone on a dating app to build up this idea in your head that they're going to be perfect and they're this and their chat is this. You ask them every single question you would ask normally in a bar, and then when you meet them, you're heavily disappointed, or it doesn't live up to expectations, or they're not quite who they say they were, and vice versa. So if you're thinking that, of course, the opinion of them is exactly the same, and that sort of creates this very negative spiral. And I'm not here to say that dating apps don't work. There's a reason why Bumble Group and Match Group are as big as they are, because they do work. But I went to 3 weddings last year, 1 last week, where they met on Hinge, and the best man speech is all about their fun cover story about how they can cover up the fact they met on a dating app. I think that says quite a lot.
Yeah. So, addictive and bad for you. I'd love to hear from the people in the audience and maybe people at home who are currently users of dating apps. Do you concur in any sense? Hello. What's your name, sir?
Pablo.
Hi, Pablo. Am I allowed to ask which app is your preferred app at the moment?
I'm not gonna say because I work for a dating
Secret.
app, so I prefer not to say.
Okay.
Oh, God.
But I would say that I don't agree. I think definitely in every app and in every service that we consume, including Netflix, there's a bit of addiction nowadays. But I don't agree that they are bad. let's
Bumble.
say.
What's- So
100%.
the kind of the witness of the prosecution described as sort of in general negative spiral. It starts with objectification and unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, I think it depends on the app, right? Like, and something I wanted to say is that it's not like Thursday versus everything else. I think there's a huge kind of spectrum of dating apps, like from Grindr, which some people love Grindr, some people hate Grindr, to Tinder, huge, Bumble, more specific, Hinge, quite different compared to everything else. But there's a huge list of other apps, right? And every app has a different level of safety and has a different level of entry barriers for users to join the platform. And I think this is where it's up to the user to decide, right? Like some platforms are safer, some platforms are less safer.
Which is the safest one?
In my opinion?
Yes.
Who'd you work for?
What can I say?
Can't say. Okay. Right. Which is the worst one, in your opinion?
In my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think
Safety-wise.
safety-wise, so I think it's very easy for someone to test it. Like try to match with someone, like with a friend if you can, on a dating app, and try to send like a nude picture to see what happens. Try to send a rude message to see what happens. You will see that some apps would block those messages or would block those users, and some other apps would not block those users.
Okay.
So I think that already says a lot about what are the priorities for a company,
Yeah.
Where to put their money and where to put their development efforts.
Okay. All right. That's great. Thank you so much. Nice to hear from you. I could see some people nodding along. I might come back to you in a second. I'm going to bring in Catherine. I've seen you with your hand up in the purple dress as well. I'm going to bring in Catherine, if I may, because since we did our first round of reporting on this, Catherine, in 2019, lots of the big apps, the Hinge, the Bumbles, the Tinders, have implemented, because I've been keeping my BDI on it, new safety policies and procedures, a smorgasbord of different types of stuff. And your organisation is one of those things. Just tell us what Garbo is, what it does, and how it's changed the Tinder user experience.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for having me here today. Garbo is a new kind of safety screening tool really designed to help proactively prevent harm in the digital age. So with very limited information before that first date, ideally, you would search someone in our platform to see if they have a history of violence or harmful arrests, convictions, or sex offender records. So we are here in the US only. We are one of the many safety features, as you mentioned, that folks are beginning to adopt. But we are seeing this holistic approach to prioritizing user safety, which is really what excites me, is the shift in the entire trust and safety industry happening. Like now there's an actual trust and safety industry where that didn't exist before. And so platforms are prioritizing safety at different levels, like he mentioned, but I don't think it's like one platform looks at safety differently. I talk to every dating app, right? Every single dating app I've probably talked to, and or most of them, or tried to some of them, but they all want safety. They all want to create a safe platform. It is about access to these safety features, even knowledge of safety features and what they can implement. So that's my role, is a lot of educating about, VoIP detection as a safety feature, like photo verification, all of these different safety features, like you mentioned, that apps can start to adopt.
Catherine, I'll ask, like I said, I'm not a dating app native user, so I'm probably going to ask some slightly annoying detailed questions. But in the instance of Tinder, where the Tinder users have access to the Garbo service or platform, forgive me if I'm not quite using the right language, it's effectively a kind of a database of known criminally convicted people with a history of violence or abuse in some way. Is that right?
It's arrest, convictions, and sex offender records. Yeah.
Okay. And so I've swiped and been matched, and I'm excited to go on a date with this person, but I'm like, let me just check if they're a rapist or not. What happens? What do I do? Do I press a button? Is it automatically there? What happens?
Yeah, so we've designed it to be a separate experience today, where you have to get some information from the other person, right? And we know that about 90% of conversations move off app, right? When it starts to actually get to a date experience. So there's a phone number exchange. Yeah. And so it's with that first name that you get from the profile and the phone number and some other details. Sometimes they put their work on there, and you can actually get their last name by kind of doing some LinkedIn searching and all of these other things. Like, 80% of online daters are searching Google, right? And they're trying to find information about people. We just say, Google's not going to tell you that, like, they're a rapist, for example, right? It's going to be very rare. And so giving them the opportunity to find this. So you just take the little information that you have, first name, phone number is usually enough, run it through the system, takes anywhere from 10 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on if they have a record. And then we show it to you. And then we have access to resources like our partnership with the domestic violence hotline and things like that. Should you see a record, which can be a visceral reaction, you were just talking to this person, now you see that they have a record, here's resources to go get help, have a conversation, safety plan, things like that.
So I completely see the functionality and the value of that in the case where the person is using their real name and hasn't changed their mobile phone number since they were convicted. But how good is that system at rooting out not that person?
No, so we have about 97% coverage of the US with personal identifying information and being able to take that limited information and deduce it back. We have AKA name matches, right? So maybe it's not the first name we submitted, but it matches on a known name of that person. Yeah. And we have VoIP detection built into it. So if someone is giving you a VoIP number, that could mean a lot of things for a lot of different reasons. We will actually tell you, hey, this is a VoIP number and here's what that could mean. So built-in safety features into our platform as well.
Okay, interesting. That's obviously one thing. That's the service that you offer, but you talk, like you say, to the apps about all sorts of things. Give me a sense of, if this is possible briefly, the sort of high watermark of what is possible if an app decided, one of the big scale players, a Bumble or a Tinder, or whoever it is, Hinge, decided they wanted to be the absolute belt and braces technically, and we'll talk about other policies afterwards because it's not all about the technology. What is the sort of range of things available? There's your service, and what else could or should they be doing? I'm wondering if there's a sort of best practice, you know?
Yeah, we have 5 safety features that we recommend every dating app kind of have at a basic level. So first is VoIP detection. So not allowing users to create an account with a VoIP number because you can't extract that personal identifying information off of it. And our belief is that platforms deserve the right to know who is using their platform. So in case they are causing harm, they can hold that person accountable. Then 2-factor authentication of either an email address or a phone number. Identity verification, we're seeing a lot of IDV companies pop up, and that is a very broad term about what ID verification truly actually means. Face detection in photos, so if someone uploads a photo, making sure it actually has a face in it. And then of course, the final being safety screening, some sort of background check, safety screen for users.
Yeah, okay. And in your experience, how many of the major dating apps, and I know that's a loose definition, have implemented all 5 of those things?
Oh, that's a great question.
0.
I know a lot of them have at least some level, and we're seeing these Gen Z dating apps pop up, like Lolly, like Snack, that are looking for these safety features, but again, they don't know about them to even start to implement them. So I think a lot of them have been reactive, to implementing these safety features. Something comes out and then they react, versus this new generation trying to be more proactive in safety.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thanks ever so much, Catherine. We'll come back to you. There maybe will be questions that Catherine can answer that I can't. Lady here in the purple dress, you had your hand up, and then I'll come to Luke.
I was just going to say it's quite an interesting point on the safety thing, because I know with Hinge, algorithm kind of works through mutuals of mutuals, at least if you sign up through Facebook. So there have been some occasions where I've kind of messaged a mutual friend saying, hey, I'm going on a date with this person, what do you think about them? And I think that's kind of, that relies on the proactivity of users, but that is one way that I found like my friends and I have kept each other safe in that sense.
Does that work in the Hinge one? Is if you both know?
It used to work like that. It's not that anymore.
Yeah.
That was their niche into the market, cracking in. It's not friends of friends via Facebook anymore, because you can create an account on Hinge without having a Facebook account.
Oh, I see. It was the Facebook world that joined you together.
It was like social proofing.
Yes,
was one of their things, but you can create an account on Hinge without having Facebook.
Right.
So you can't then track who's friends of friends anymore. Okay,
interesting. When you checked with your friends about people you were going to go on a date with, did any of them warn you off?
Oh, you know what? No, a lot of the time, if they were a close friend, they would be like, oh no, this person's great, and then they turn out to be awful, and then I go back to them and say, you sent me into the lion's den, but they're like, no, I'm not going to, say my friend is a bad person.
Yeah.
So maybe it doesn't work.
Yeah, thank you very much. What was your name, sorry?
Serena,
thanks, Serena. Luke?
Hi, I was really interested in that 10% figure from the beginning about those that think that this company doesn't, those that do think they take the safety of their users seriously, and whether it would be higher or lower or roughly the same for Instagram or TikTok or Reddit or any other, because I think a lot obviously about sort of online platforms in general, not just dating ones. The point being that I think actually the internet is inherently unsafe, and particularly with dating apps, they're unsafe by design, because they know that unsafety correlates closely with engagement, inflammatory content, and there are 2 types of unsafety that I think are important for dating apps. There's the unsafety of chronic addicted usage, which can damage your mental health and all the stuff you were describing at the beginning, and then the unsafety of the traumatic, dangerous, violent encounter with the person. And I think that we need to see a transition to safety by design. None of the big platforms are exploring it, and I'm extremely interested in Thursday, because of that safety by design thing, particularly on the first form of safety. And Instagram have a feature which is essentially the Thursday version of Instagram, where you can say in the front end, I don't want to be able to access Instagram any more than this amount of time. If you go back to it, you have to sort of hard deselect that function. It's not perfect because you have, the programmers at Thursday have taken on that responsibility for people. And I think there's something very, very interesting in that relationship for mitigating harm.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think in terms of how much was safety, what was and is a sort of part of the conversation when you're sitting with your co-founder and thinking, what do we do with this app?
I think
there's not much on the website about personal safety.
I think the first thing to say is we're a really small startup. We launched 9 months ago, and we've made a lot of noise in what we're doing in this space. With Thursday, we had an app before, which we changed to Thursday. Safety at Thursday, I think, is a very female endearing brand because we've personified the brand as Katie, the social media manager, who is in the voice of a single person in a city like London or New York. Katie, hate to burst anyone's bubble here, but it is about 12 of us who all are single people who are sort of...
Katie is 12 of us.
Yeah, there's 12. Katie's not real. But that's how we personified the brand. And
she works here.
Yeah, right. And so what we've done is, for us, therefore, putting our heads in the guys and girls' heads of single people going on dates, either people getting gaslit, people going on bad dates, people going on dates they shouldn't, like to people's flats or for a hookup or whatever. We have tried to, in all our messaging and everything else, prevent that. We spent a lot of money against all our VC backers' advice on verifying every single person on our app. We started.
How did you do that?
We started with KYC. So we were the only app for a very long time to have every single verified user through driver's license and passport or national ID in America and the UK. That, just to clarify, cost a fortune and is not scalable. And America hated it because they kept coming back to us, lots of feedback saying, guys, you're not a bank. Why do you need your driver's license? Why do I need to give you a passport? We weren't holding on to it. We're using a third-party provider because we don't want to hold that data for very many obvious reasons. And it was a real challenge for us, a lot of negative feedback. We then moved to using AWS.
Did the users give negative feedback or just the financiers?
No, users.
Because it's a faff.
It's a faff, and there was we were very successful without blowing our own trumpet at getting downloads, and there was a real bottleneck of people then getting through the ID verification phase, and it was very expensive, which meant that anyone entering the market, whether you've done a good raise or not, is impenetrable. I mean, really impenetrable. So if you have a download cost, a CAC, whack another 50 cents per verification on top, and you're talking 100,000 downloads, it's a lot of money. And so for us, we're like, right, what can we do to make it better for our users and make them feel safer, so they're not talking to a weirdo? We do that by time boxing, because chat deletes at midnight. We now use photo verification, AWS's photo verification software, where you have to upload a photo and take a selfie to make sure that your photos match your selfie. Of course, we are not perfect, and there are people that slip through the net, but today, 1,500 people were caught in our trap of people uploading dodgy photos or taking a photo, and then a lot of it comes from Ghana, weirdly, where the biggest amount of romance fraud comes from, and I know that because we work with the London City Police, and they
1,500 people
today caught in our trap,
yours.
And that represents 5% of the downloads we get a day. So get caught in our trap. There are people that get through, but you can't stop everybody. We're doing our very best, but we are also using AWS, one of the biggest companies in the world, to do it, to try and capture them. What we don't have in place, and I'm very intrigued by what I've heard earlier, is all 5 steps. But what I'm even more intrigued about is the fact that why is $8 billion Bumble not doing all 5 steps?
Yeah.
Why is Match Group, I don't know what their net worth is, not doing all 5 steps? I'll tell you why. It's because it is extraordinarily expensive. And unfortunately, like Instagram, why is Instagram not doing it? Why is Twitter not doing it? Because the economics, I am assuming, don't work. And there is an element, someone in the audience said, when you go onto the internet, I think it was yourself, sir, when you go onto the internet, there is an element of risk that you take by being on the internet, by chatting to somebody. For us, we take comfort in the fact that by putting people face to face as quickly as possible, and in our case, in venues where they have bouncers, security, in public places, we are shifting responsibility. We own the responsibility to connect to them, but we put them in a place where they have all the Ask Angela safety mechanisms, everything in place for that to be as safe as possible. I think there's so much more that can be done on every level, but the very, very, very big companies need to lead the way, and they don't.
I want to come back to that.
They do their best, but
question
they
of
can't.
that question of responsibility and aftercare in a second, but I know Catherine has got her hand up in the telly. Catherine?
Yes. Hi. A lot of great stuff was kind of said there, and it really at this the cost of safety, right?
Yeah.
And this idea that startups and technology companies used to be this growth at all costs mentality, right? Get the users in as frictionless as possible, and then they realize that those costs, it's not dollars, it's human lives.
Yeah.
Right? Like what happened to me on Tinder, what happened to all of the dozens of people that I've heard from on these dating apps, et cetera. And so, when I hear like safety is expensive, I'm like, well, what's more expensive, being proactive in purchasing safety features and investing in safety, or being reactive when something does happen and a survivor rightfully sues the platform, or the media pushback that it costs these platforms. And so the cost of safety is real human lives, and we're seeing a lot of platforms shift of saying, it is expensive to join platform. And like Elon Musk tweeted out about Twitter, what happens if you could pay $3 to be ID verified, right? And then you get access to a safer platform for all. And so we're starting to see this like proactive approach of, hey, invest in this community safety by purchasing these safety features to offset the cost of companies, because it is expensive, right? Like I can't, run my business, it costs money, right? It's not a free thing. And so how do you balance those two things? I think, the big companies are stepping away. Tinder did bring background checks to online dating, right? They are leading the charge of it where it was never there before. ID verification coming into play, all of these things. So companies are taking bold steps, but it's an unknown territory. It's in very gray territory. Personal is very safety, or safety is very personal. All of these kinds of things come into play when companies are looking at safety investments, but it should be proactive and not reactive ultimately.
Catherine, has there been, and forgive me, maybe I should know, but has there been a successful instance in the US or elsewhere that you know of where a victim of assault who met a person on a platform has successfully sued the platform for a lack of duty of care?
Right? There's things like Section 230, right, where platforms aren't responsible, but there's a lot of changes happening to that. So whether it's successful or not, right, you're creating a public record ultimately, which is what we're all about, of saying this harm happened to me, and this is real harm. But there is a balance between platform responsibility and personal responsibility as well. And I think that's where we're finding the balance right now between those two things.
Yeah. I want to talk more about responsibility. And actually, I don't know if Kat Whitfield, my colleague, is Kat running the Zoom call possibly? She might not be able to. There you are, Kat. Sorry.
Hello.
Asking you to, because you made a point about responsibility in the chat to do with if you go on a date with someone and it goes wrong, you feel more guilty that it was your fault. So tell us about that.
I just think the difference between kind of assault, if you were just in a bar or at a club and it happened, the way you would be treated compared to if you personally chose to go on a date via a dating app and then something happened to you as a consequence of the date that you were on through the app, the difference in victim blaming there is like uber amplified, I think. And I think it's kind of a judgment for people being on dating apps in the first place. And then that translates into kind of, you should never have done it. You should have been able to vet them yourself. And I just don't really understand why that happens. It should be the opposite, if anything. Well, that shouldn't exist at all. But
I totally, thanks, Kat. I totally get your point. And hello. Hi, what's your name?
Marlene.
Hi, Marlene.
So on the back of that, one thing I don't know, but it might be interesting to look just in terms of the record of the British police in terms of treating misogyny and sexual crime against women. It would be interesting to see how they treat women who've encountered violence through digital means or through using a dating app, because so many people face pretty horrible misogyny when they report a crime. And I mean, all of the records in terms of them taking your phone to investigate. That might be an interesting subject to also look at in terms of whether people are actually deterred from reporting crime that happens to them in that field rather than...
Because there's a sort of sense, and we saw some stats at the beginning in the charts, didn't we, of where when something really terrible happens beyond a horrible misogynistic direct message or whatever in the app, when it's in the perpetrator's house where you've gone to back with them after being in the pub, or you've gone to meet them there, and yes, I fear you are right, and the reception may be different. What will happen in the case of Thursday? If I were to go on tomorrow, think, oh, I like you, let's go for a drink at the Champion, and I get there and it's horrendous. The person isn't who they said they were, and or something worse. What recourse do I have to you?
So you block and report, which we have in the app. That will come through to selected people in the company who monitor it. Our policy, and it is in line with the UK police force and New York State police force, is if a crime is committed on said date, we will work with the police directly. But what we do get is a very big whack of, and I'm not going to put a number on it because it fluctuates and I'll be lying if I knew exactly what it was, of people being like, oh, he was really rude to me on a date, like block. Well, who are we as a company to decide the fact that we disagreed over something? Girl on guy, girl on girl, guy on guy, guy on girl, that was there, we're not there. If it is, our policy as a company is, if it's an offence or whatever it is, report it to the police, and if the police want to work with us, we will. And if we have to pull up our records to work with the police, we will. But we won't engage in people just saying that this person was rude or this person was racist or this person was sexist, because we were not there. What we can do, however, is when they report someone, can see the conversation that was had, and then it's a human call, and it is if there was open racism, if there was open sexism, if there was open misogyny or whatever it is, we can then ban that IP address, so that person gets banned, and that is a human call as it stands. And that's about as far as we can take it.
So the unfortunately, this particular person, I'm going to tell a story now, it's not my story, but the person told it to me and it wasn't able to be here this evening. So a person who I know very well had a relationship, a full-on proper relationship that lasted for sort of a year and a bit or something, like a proper relationship, with a man that she met on Dearly Departed Guardian Soulmates, and he was a violent and abusive person, as it transpired over the course of their relationship. And she reported him to Guardian Soulmates, and when she was able to provide them with a police crime reference number for when she'd called the police to come and get him out of the flat, they did remove him from their service, whatever it was. But he remained on Bumble, where he also had a profile, and she reported him to them as well.
I can't speak for Bumble at all. I can't speak for any other dating app apart from our own. We are yet to receive a crime reference number.
Right.
Being totally honest, and I think we put more people face to face in this city every week than most major dating apps. Actually face to face.
Yeah, it might be Maline's point again, that the getting of, if the crime reference number is the right benchmark, because I have sympathy with your perspective, because otherwise who are you to say?
It has to be the way. And
if somebody came to you and said, I was sexually assaulted by this person, I haven't been to the police, but I'm telling you.
We've had that.
What do you do then?
We have a very tight script. We're very, very apologetic that it's happened. In fact, I'm sorry, I'm going to retract that. We don't do that, actually. We tell them to go to the police. Because we are not there. We are not the police. We are.
Does that person stay on your platform that complaint was made about?
No, they actually get put on pause.
Right.
But I think that's happened 4 times off memory, and we tell them to go to the police. We cannot go to the police for us doing it. We tell them to go to the police. And on Tuesday, I had the City of London Police in my office because they're running a report on, and the City of London's quite small, 1 square mile, as we all know.
Yeah.
But that's where a lot of our events happen. We are not the law.
Yeah.
And whilst I've got a younger sister, I have a girlfriend, if that was the case, I'd be mortified if that happened. But as a company, we cannot, if we took he was rude, he did this, she did that, he did this.
There's a difference between he was rude to I was sexually assaulted in his flat.
There absolutely is, but we're not the law.
What do people think? This is difficult, I get it. Katie. Sorry, Alice is coming around.
Is that okay if I
Yeah,
ask
cool. Yeah.
I was wondering if you say you use AWS verification.
Amazon Web Services, that means, right? Yeah.
Verification services. Do you know what percentage of people who get rejected for verification are not white? And
I thought this might come up. It's a fair question. It's a very fair question.
There's been a lot of reporting about recognition, which is AWS's facial recognition.
Because it's designed for Caucasian faces and it's not as good for people African Americans,
and
whatever.
That set off kind of alarm bells when you talk about Ghana, because
yeah.
So I'm not here to speak for Amazon. We are not in the. We do not have the finance to create our own platform for facial verification. So we plug into who provide the vast majority of facial recognition around the world. We have to. We have had a complaint about that. The reason why I mentioned Ghana, we are not live in Ghana. And the City of London Police said the vast majority of romance fraud is from warehouses in Ghana specifically, and I can quote them on that, not Matt Manil Love making this up, where it happens and where it comes from. So whilst I accept there are lots of stuff on the internet about AWS being racist, in a nutshell, is what you're trying to say, I can't speak on behalf of AWS.
Sure.
I can't speak on behalf of them.
You've made a procurement decision of a best-in-class product as best you can. I understand that, but I think it's a good point, Katie. We'll add it to the list of things. I know Catherine's got her secret digital hand up that I can't see, but someone's WhatsApping me to say it's there. Catherine, come back in on this.
Yeah, no, a lot of interesting stuff was said there, and I disagree with a lot of what was just said about going to the police. We know that less than 20% of gender-based violence offenses ever end up being reported to the police. And then less than 1% of those that are reported end in convictions, right? So when you tell someone to go to the police, that's a very privileged thing to say to someone. As someone who has gone through the justice systems myself, there are many reasons people choose not to go to the police. And the platforms do have a responsibility. They're, like you mentioned, there's a difference between someone saying he was rude and someone saying I was sexually assaulted. And you mentioned coming with a script, right? And you said you took it back, but you said it, that there is a script and you say, we feel bad, now go to the police. Again, that's very, very difficult. And so there's a lot of kind of privilege coming into this conversation where, it just really upsets me that it's like, no, platforms do have a responsibility, have to have a voice in this, and a stake in the ground of what you will and will not tolerate on your platform.
So, Catherine, in that exact scenario that we described with Matt, where somebody comes to him and says, "I've had this terrible experience," and it's not, "Oh, it was a bit rude," or it was, "I've been sexually assaulted in his flat." What do you say? Because Matt's right; he's not the police. What should
other platforms will ban that person?
Yeah.
Other platforms, major platforms, will ban that person from not only that single app, but every app in our portfolio, right? For just the report. And while that can be misused, right? Like someone can falsely report someone, you should err on the side of believing survivors at all points and not require them to jump through these very horrible, burdensome things to get a police report from you or get a conviction or something.
What do people think in the room? This is on the responsibility. Let's stick with this scenario. Luke.
I'll try to be brief because I spoke already, but
yeah, it's okay.
It was interesting she mentioned Section 230 because that's the exact clause which at the moment is not undergoing any major re-architecting or anything. There's pressure around it, but it hasn't changed, which removes the liability of platforms for content that appears. And dating apps are exactly the same. Content appears as people's profiles, the messages they send. You're a facilitator. Yeah. And I think we're actually working into a quite naive type of thinking when we say platforms have to have a voice. We've got a decade and a half of proof that they don't have to have a voice, and we need to behave as a civilization, as communities, as individuals, as if the platforms will not stand up for us at all. And no offence meant at all to you and your developers and your team, but actually we're citizens in a society where there's this construct that we can choose to go into that's inherently unsafe, and we need to manage the risks of doing that because we've got ample proof that the platforms will not.
So what should happen in that scenario then?
Well, obviously, I think the reason you mentioned reference to the police is that there has to be a rule of law, or that's a hard line. But I would say that I came into this conversation thinking that people shouldn't use dating apps. I actually don't think we should use social media at all. And that seems like a radical view, but I think it encourages...
So thinking for another day, friends.
It encourages pathologies, it's corrosive to our ability to form like real relationships with one another. And if we look back in 50 years, I think we'll see the proliferation of social media as the worst thing that we did with technology.
Yeah, interesting. I've got a lot of people nodding. Sophie's hand up at the back. Sophie, are you a dating app user? I'm not trying to shame you. It's a circle of trust.
Thanks. I'm not anymore, but I'm a recent deleter.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Because it just was all the dates I had were...
We've had conversations in the lunchroom about your dating apps.
Which makes it sound like I talk about it all the time. But I don't. I like that stated on the record. I mean, I deleted for many reasons, but I think for me it's about burden of proof, and I don't think that the law is necessarily, as was mentioned before, I don't think the law is necessarily like the bar that should be set, but I agree is like that's the one that makes sense because you don't want to... Exactly, that's the one that there is. So I think that's a wider system failing rather than a sort of like app failing on their own.
Do you feel better now you've deleted your dating apps?
Yeah, but I think I was one of those people that would let it sit and kind of, I'd have a match and then a couple of messages and be like, I can't be asked with this fake thing. So then I'm one of those people that deletes and then re-downloads and then deletes.
Maybe you're a Thursday person.
Maybe I'm a Thursday person.
I think you're Katie.
Well, so I think I actually did. Yeah, I was going to say, I think I actually did almost my own version of Thursday on Hinge, where I would basically say, I'm not into this whole like it takes us 3 weeks to actually meet each other. If we do, we go for a drink or we don't. Which I was told by a friend encourages creeps, which was really great. I haven't met any creeps, but I think I've just been lucky because I also haven't been on that many dates. But yeah, I think there's almost like I know some people who have had bad experiences and they were encouraged to go to like helplines and things like that.
Yes.
If they didn't want to go to the police, or if it wasn't something.
That was the big Bumble announcement, wasn't it, last year? You can have therapy if something terrible happens to you.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know if this is something you'd consider at Thursday, but maybe that's the burden of proof. Maybe it's like a
very good idea.
This is I've been to this service. I'm clearly serious. I'm not just doing this for a laugh. but I don't want to go to the police, because I think also I had a friend who was assaulted, and her experiences with the police were like shocking. And I think especially young people. So when Tommy and I were talking about it earlier, when she was making the slides that went up beforehand, we were looking at how young the demographic were. And I was totally shocked. I didn't realise that. So I first downloaded a dating app when I was at uni because nobody could talk to each other. And I don't know, I think the fact that like 17, 18-year-olds are dealing with the crap that I dealt with on a dating app. Like I'm 23, and there were some really horrible messages, but I'm old enough to know that that's not what
it does get quite nasty quite quickly in the messages, doesn't it?
Especially with the whole kind of, you have a couple of photos, obviously you choose your nice ones where like you're like at the beach with your friends or whatever, and people just make comments about your body, and I think that's really harmful.
For sure. It's full objectification world, isn't it? Seb, thanks Sophie, nice to hear from you. You wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, just in response to your question.
Are you a dating app user?
I have, yes.
You have?
Yeah. But in response to your question of what should platforms do, it seems like technology should improve. You know, the whole point is they should improve on the systems we have, and therefore I would say that it should take people's claims more seriously than society and police can. So if I was to say, you know, if I was in charge of all the dating apps, I would say there should be connection between all of them, and any claim that someone has done something should be taken like extremely seriously, and they should be banned from all dating apps. And maybe they can make a new one, maybe they can jump through hoops to create a new account, but it should be like a very serious thing to to claim that someone has done something, and you know that if you say that they've done that, they get banned from everything. And I don't know, that seems like if I was in charge, that would be a good.
So I know that the kind of, and Catherine mentioned it, and it's a big part of modern mainstream feminism, believe survivors, because the whole of history has been the opposite of that. Is that really proportionate? That a person with absolutely groundless, you know, or not proofless, not groundless, but proofless.
I think that if we start taking these claims more seriously and really putting weight on them, people will take them more seriously as well, and it won't just be this like, oh, you know, I'm just gonna say that someone did something. It's like, no, if I say someone did something, this is serious.
What happens if you're lying?
The thing is, if we build this system of believing people, then slowly that, you just wouldn't lie, because the consequences of lying are so extreme for people that you would never lie.
What can you do to that person who's, what can I do? So I accuse you of sexually assaulting me because we matched on a dating app, and there might be no proof that we've even ever met. You're now banned from every single dating app platform.
Well, I mean, maybe, you know, you surely you can find out if someone's met it up in person. You know, you can say that if they've exchanged numbers.
Not that easily.
Yeah. All I'm saying is, I think a system that we take, like just generally in society, if we take people's kind of claims more seriously and then start on dating apps, then it'll become a heavier thing to criticize someone of something. And I don't know, I just see that as a positive change.
I just would like to, thanks Seb so much, Seb. I'm going to just try if I could bring in Lucy O, if she's there. Are you there, Lucy O, in the chat?
Hi, yes.
Hello, Lucy. Sorry, I've slightly dropped that on you, but I'm really interested in the back and forth you're having in the chat with Sandra and Tommy and others, because the point you're making in response to Luke's point, I don't think we should be on dating apps at all, I don't think we should be on social media, is kind of, well, that's all well and good if you live in Shoreditch.
Yeah, I think it's great if you're, you know, living, and maybe you're living with friends, or you have a big group of friends who maybe you could meet people through them, where you have other ways of meeting people. But I have quite a small group of friends. I live in the suburbs. So like, if I didn't have a dating app, how would I ever meet somebody? I've kind of already know all the friends of my friends, and I don't want to date them. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at it.
They're a right wrong bunch.
Yeah.
Friends of friends. So Lucy, you live in the suburbs, but this is interesting. So when you do go on a date, because you know everybody who lives in your immediate, you know, so do you travel far to meet the people that you go on a date with?
Yeah, I probably travel into London to be somewhere kind of public. And if I am going to meet somebody when I'm out somewhere, you know, like traditionally, that's is when, you know, someone approaches you in a bar or something, and that, you know, as a young woman, that is quite uncomfortable most of the time. You don't actually want that. So I don't think dating apps are a bad thing. I feel safer probably using dating apps than I would just going out to a bar and meeting somebody. At least you have kind of something on them. They might put their Instagram on there or something like that, and you have something you can look at to decide who they are and if you trust them more.
Thanks ever so much, Lucy. I can see Patricia at the back. Patricia.
It's just a tiny thing to add to what Lucy said, which is that Maddie and I earlier were talking about how if you're queer and you're not out of the closet, or if you're disabled, dating apps can be a really useful resource for meeting people where you otherwise couldn't, neurodivergent people as well. So I think not using them at all is just a bit naive as a perspective. Yeah,
for sure. And actually one aspect of this conversation that I was going to do a fair amount on, but then the Wall Street Journal did a piece on it on the 2nd of May. Is about data security and safety, particularly of LGBT, the trading in the data and all of that kind of thing, but we've kind of touched on that. I can see that the little flag has gone up, which means officially, can't be, it is, it's 1929. This has been really fascinating, and as I hoped it would, we've kind of cracked open a number of further lines of inquiry that I'd like to pick up and sort of run with. What we typically do at Tortoise is we'll have a thinking like this. If you've been watching along or sitting in the room and something that you'd like to share but you don't feel comfortable blurting it out in a room like this, and why would you? Write to me, liz@tortoisemedia.com, in confidence. I'd love to hear your stories, your experiences. If you've used the complaints, the aftercare service, what did or didn't happen, all of that stuff. If you have extra insight on how the technology works or how it should work, I'd love to hear those stories. So please do write to me. We will take it away and digest. The notes I've made cover a whole bunch of things. 1,500 a day is the number of the night.
Caught in the trap, yeah.
Extraordinary. Maybe we can follow up on that whole thing. Katie's point about AWS is an important one that I think I'd really like to understand more about the way the technology does its filtering when it does it, for good and bad, sort of unintended consequences, if you like, of well-intentioned design systems. I'd like to verify what Catherine suggested was the case, which was that none of the major services have implemented all 5 things, and that the reason for that, our hypothesis is economic. I'd really like to have a proper look at what would the economics of that be, and what would be the non-financial benefit of potentially implementing these things. And I'd really like to understand the efficacy of each of these individual technological barriers, the sort of preventative things that we talked about as well. There's a whole nother thinking in well-being and behaviour and the changes in the way that we do or don't relate to one another as a consequence of using these services rather than other means. But I think that's a whole separate from the safety conversation. Really, really big thank you to you all for coming, to Catherine for being brilliant in the telly, for Matt for being brilliant in real life. I think we should do a Thursday club here at Tortoise. I genuinely do. I think it'd be amazing. I still want a Tortoise wedding and a baby. And I met my partner at work, and I think you should all do the same thing, because it is definitely the best non-scary, weirdo way of meeting people. So have a lovely evening. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, everybody. Safe journey home. Thank you.